we are going to be looking at the legendary rivalry between the, I'm going to say comedian. It's hard to say comedian. Performance artist.
Yes.
Andy Kaufman.
Yes, outside artist, I'd say.
And Jerry the King Lawler. The work of Andy Kaufman is better talked about by other people
than watched.
It really is. He'd started off doing performances in comedy clubs in the early 1970s. He'd read The Great Gatsby in a foreign accent. He would do a thing where he played the theme from Mighty Mouse, and he would stay absolutely rigid on the stage until the line came, "Here I come to save the day," which he'd lip sync to, and then he'd go back to being very nervous. He'd do an Elvis Presley impersonation that was very good, and then he'd end that by looking at the crowd and going, "Thank you very much," in a small foreign man voice.
Again, these are all good, fun ideas.
Yeah.
But when you watch him, you sort of go...
Exactly that. And a lot of people, even in the documentaries that I've watched about him, will say, I went and saw him and I thought it was awful and embarrassing. It was terrible. But it's his strangeness and his boldness that has endured. And the fact is, he didn't do it cynically. He did it out of some weird internal need to do what he was doing. He had a big thing that he just sort of said, I go out there and try and be as entertaining as I can. It wasn't very entertaining, but the spirit of that is something magical. And when you see, your Michael McIntyres and your Peter Kays, it's hard not to go, I prefer Andy Kaufman.
Yes.
Even though watching it, I'd find difficult. It wouldn't be a fun hour. Like watching Peter Kay, you'd go, I mean, he's very good. But you still go, I prefer Andy Kaufman because Andy Kaufman is doing something much, much bigger and deeper and more interesting, even though the actual stuff that he's doing is, by and large, rubbish. Kaufman came to the attention of a wider audience in 1975 when his funny foreign guy, they began putting on Saturday Night Live. And that was very quickly transformed into him being given a role as Latka on the sitcom Taxi, which was huge. And Kaufman got nominated for 2 Emmys for his performances as Latka. But even on that, he was being quite thrillingly weird. So he had another character that he did called Tony Clifton, who was slightly like an abusive club singer. So he said to the guys in Taxi, they'd said, why don't we do something with Tony Clifton on the show? And Andy Kaufman said, well, we're going to need separate contracts for like Tony Clifton. And they were like, well, okay, we'll do that then, yeah. So they gave Tony Clifton a contract and they did the episode and they were like, do you know what? This isn't working. They said, so we're actually not going to use Tony Clifton. So Andy Kaufman said, well, you're going to have to fire him. And what they decided on was that Andy Kaufman would come in as Tony Clifton. He would cause a real ruckus on set, at which point they would fire him, which happened. He antagonised all of the other cast members and he was really abusive. So they fired him. And the next day, Andy Kaufman turned up as if nothing had happened. That is thrilling. You wouldn't want that to be part of your daily work existence.
No, you don't need that.
That would be very, very tiring. What is fascinating is that he then becomes involved in the wrestling business. And it's the only bit of Andy Kaufman's life that you go, this is watchable, it makes sense, and it works.
Yeah.
His manager was like, I think he's a genius and everything. I wasn't very keen on the wrestling thing. And you watch it and you go, the wrestling thing is the only bit that works. This is the only bit that's good. Kaufman himself had been a wrestling fan since childhood. It was the sort of thing that I think he was interested in because it wasn't what was expected from the type of star and person that he was, a New Yorker, hip and in comedy and in television. It wasn't the sort of thing that people expected him to do. It was also one of those things that blurred the boundaries between what was real, what he was doing as a joke and, what he really was. And it's one of the first examples of proper worked angles where he fools everyone. This is a great worked shoot angle. Never, ever been done better.
Now, I'm not saying women are mentally inferior to men because when it comes to things like cooking and cleaning, washing the potatoes, scrubbing the carrots, raising the babies, mopping the floors, they have it all over men. I believe that. But when it comes to the wrestling, when it comes to them getting in the wrestling ring, there's nothing up there. They're all oatmeal north of the eyebrows. They're all, we Tina for brains, you know what I mean?
It starts off with him as part of his New York shows and, touring around the country. He starts putting in a little segment where he begins taking on women from the audience. He begins wrestling them on stage. For a short time, Laurie Anderson, who went on to be the wife of Lou Reed, but had a very avant-garde pop career. She had a song called Oh, Superman in the 70s that was a huge hit.
Oh, Superman.
She was his assistant, and they would go around and wrestle women. And as a big wrestling fan, he approached Vince McMahon Sr. of the WWF to say, I'd like to do something on your shows. And Vince McMahon Sr. said, I don't want to get involved with showbiz people. This is a closed world. You do not need you in it. But as part of his attempts to get in with the WWF, he'd become friends with Bill Apter, who was a photographer and the guy who was sort of most associated with Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the magazine. Big seller at the time. And Apter had said, well, if it's not going to work with the WWF, I've got a contact with Jerry the King Lawler down in Memphis. Why don't I give you his number? So Kaufman rings Lawler and says, what do you think? And Lawler thinks, this is great. A free Hollywood celebrity. I can make some money with this. So off he goes. They start it off with him doing a little interview where he talks about being the intergender champion of the world. And he talks about how he's been undefeated in 3.5 years of taking on women. And he plays up to all of those stereotypes of what the Southern wrestling fan would have hated.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Andy Kaufman, as of course most of you know. Every week, I'm going to be coming on here, on this station, and I'm going to give you little tips about how you can better your lives and how I can bring you up from the level that you're in right now and bring you up from the squalor that you're living in, the gutter and the garbage. This week, I'd like to start off, first and foremost, the most important thing is personal hygiene. Okay? Now, let's start off. This is a bar of soap.
He was arrogant. He was, a bully by taking on women. He was skinny. He wore these white leggings underneath these big baggy shorts that made it look like he had real pencil legs. He's also from Hollywood. He's now in the South and he's superior. He's also Jewish. And again, that's a thing which isn't really touched on much when they tell this story. But that would be a thing in the South, that all of the things that he was were the things that were like a red rag to them, that they absolutely would have loathed. He was not a real man as far as they were concerned, but he was full of himself. He's the only person who didn't realise he wasn't the epitome of masculinity. That is a perfect way to get proper nuclear heat down in the South in the 80s. He did a series of wrestling women in Memphis to build up to what was going to happen. And the last of 4 matches that he did in one night was against a woman called Foxy Jackson, who was an African-American woman who was quite tough. Now, Kaufman did do shoot matches with the women. He talks about it quite frankly a couple of times, just saying, I had the thought that even if they were bigger than me, the chances were I'd be able to beat them. He said, if I had a man the same size as me, he's going to destroy me. But a woman I could probably manage to beat. Foxy Jackson takes him down and is actually very close to beating him. The crowd explode and he manages to sort of pin her, but it comes very close to coming off the rails before it's even started. Pure, simple wrestling logic. He also says if he's beaten by a woman, he'll shave his head bald, and as an extra prize, any woman who beats him, he will marry. That is a phenomenal set of circumstances. Jerry Lawler has been sort of helping Foxy Jackson out, and Kaufman is delighted. Even with Jerry Lawler's help, this woman wasn't able to beat him. And as Lawler is on the ring consoling Foxy Jackson, Kaufman starts doing chicken arms. And Lawler pushes him. And when he pushes him down, you've never heard a crowd react like it. The heat that he gets just from this really simple build is astonishing.
Once again, the time, ladies and gentlemen, 8 minutes, 35 seconds. Whoa!
I will sue! Lawler! I will sue you! You don't touch me! I am from Hollywood! I'll get Hollywood against you, baby! I'll sue you, baby! Lawler! I don't wrestle men! You don't touch me, baby! I'll sue you or everything you've got! You won't have anything left when I'm through with you!
They carry it on where Kaufman sues Lawler, and you see this play out week after week in Memphis television. And he'd start doing these things where he'd send in these promos that he'd filmed in a back garden by a swimming pool.
It's just so funny. It's just like where Bruce Lee would have his fights, you know what
Exactly
I mean? That kind of like palatial kind of pool sort of thing.
What's even sweeter about that? That's not Andy Kaufman's back garden. That's Jerry Lawler's back garden.
Oh, is it really?
They
Right,
are
okay.
working together. In one of them, he's got his agent, Bob Zamuda, is there. It might be solicitor, Bob Zamuda. And Bob Zamuda was one of Andy Kaufman's close friends.
Right.
And he would occasionally portray Tony Clifton, even on Letterman appearances. He'd send Bob Zamuda to do it instead of him. More part of his playing around with what's real and what's not. Bob Zamuda, best known now for founding the American Comic Relief organisation that he did a year after it was done in the UK. So, I mean, not great brainwave. But Kaufman, who is so good in everything he does in this, he comes up against Jerry Lawler. And at the time, there could have been no one better for him to go against than Lawler. And you realise watching this is how good Lawler is on the mic. This is, to me, the reason why we all say legendary on the stick, old Lawler. I mean, he could really go on the mic, and he really can.
Yeah.
And it's so well done.
You can get all of these. This lawyer looks like the kind of guy that specializes in whiplash cases, you know, that chases the ambulances. You can get all the lawyers you want to, Andy Kaufman, and you can sue me all you want to, but I've got a very simple solution for you, wimp. And I've realized that he's obviously got somebody taping this, or he's going to find out what I say. So if Andy Kaufman wants to live out his fantasy of being a wrestler, I can let him live that out real easily, Lance. If he would ever once step into the wrestling ring with a man, you would see what it would be like to be a wrestler, and it would end your fantasies and end your dreams in just about 30 seconds, and you would never want to be in a wrestling ring again.
In the entirety of everything they do, there are no logic flaws. The whole time, they are just building and building and building, and it's just beautifully done. They build up with these videos. It keeps going. The two of them are never together, but Kaufman is constantly taunting him. And most people will know a couple of, if you're a big wrestling fan, you probably have seen the match they would eventually have, and you've probably seen them on Letterman. And if you haven't seen that, you might have seen the Man in the Moon film, which was with Jim Carrey, that was about the life of Kaufman, which dramatised this, sort of made it more famous than it had ever been made previously.
He's an absolute embarrassment to humanity. This man from Hollywood.
You see, I am from Hollywood.
Who cares?
I have the brains.
Nobody cares where you're
I'm
from.
the king. I'm the king.
Lawler plays himself 25 years after he was himself, and he looks pretty much as good in the ring.
Oh, amazing.
Now, or then, when they did Man on the Moon, as he did like in his heyday. Yeah. It's a really good film, Man on the Moon, and it's Lawler's very, very good in it. In his book, he talks about how Jim Carrey was really horrible. So he also didn't like Courtney Love. He said she smoked all the time.
Sorry, George. We just thought it was funny.
You don't have to be sorry, Jerry. You're terrific. You're just the best.
I wouldn't have traded it for anything. To me, this was a shining moment for wrestling.
But there's a little clip where he brings out Susan, who is a very big, dumpy woman, and Kaufman is so good in this clip. I think we should just play it in its entirety.
All these things you've been saying about me on television, you want to wrestle me? You want to wrestle me, Memphis style? All right, fine. I'm not afraid of you, Mr. Lawler, because let me tell you something. True, I only wrestle women, but I've wrestled women that are a lot bigger and stronger than you. Matter of fact, they're probably smarter than you because you don't have any brains. You're from Memphis, Tennessee. All you do is plow the fields and farm and the farm and is that how you talk to Memphis, Tennessee, Mr. Lawler? Boo. See, Mr. Lawler, you don't have any brains. I'm from Hollywood. I have the brains. That's how I win my matches. I say the bigger they come, the harder they fall. You might be twice as big as me, but I've wrestled women that are twice as big as me, and I've mopped the floor with them. And that's what I'm going to do with you, Mr. Lawler. You challenged me to a wrestling match. I think you bit off a little more than you can chew. I'm going to wipe the floor with you, Mr. Lawler. I'll give you a little sample. This is what's going to happen when you and I wrestle each other in Memphis. Come here. What's your name?
Susan.
How tall are you, Susan?
6 foot.
And how much do you weigh?
327.
327 pounds. That's a lot more than you weigh, Lawler. Okay? Watch this. Let's go. Come on, baby! That's what's just gonna happen to you, Lawler! See? Come on,
She's bashing her head off the floor.
Yeah.
Andy, I think you really hurt her.
Doesn't matter. She doesn't have any money. She's poor. She can't sue me. See, I can do anything I want. Get the camera off. Shut this camera off. Come on, baby.
What you can hear in that as well is you can hear the roll of the VCR. You can hear the cars in the background. Yeah. This is all done on a shoestring, and that gives it this weird sense of being very real. this is just wrestling perfection for me. Also because the original film and footage, a lot of it has been lost.
Right.
And so all of those bits seem like amazing sort of relics that have just been dug up and preserved. They've been saved from the jaws of history. And each little scrap just gives you a sense of the importance and the build of this incredible routine.
I am leaving! And I'm never coming back to Memphis again! You will never see this face here again!
They would go on to have a match against each other at a sold-out Mid-South Coliseum, and their heat on it is off the charts. It is astonishing. Kaufman spends most of the time running away, and Lawler gets on the mic and he said, "Did you come down here to wrestle or to act like an ass?" And the crowd explode.
Let me ask you something. Did you come down here to wrestle or act like an ass?
Lawler is so good in this because at no point does Lawler go, "I'm a funny guy and I'm going to go, this pencil neck geek. Oh, I could." He just spends his whole time going, "You are so disrespectful. You have wound me up massively." And so Lawler brings in this thing very, very sensibly done where he goes, "I don't need to be the funny guy because I've got the funny guy here. And what I need to be is I need to be Stone Cold Steve Austin."
Yeah.
Not a reference he'd have used back then. But I need to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. I need to be the guy who represents everyone in that audience who is just like, "I am sick of this guy." And Lawler does a really, really good pitch at just going, "I am going to just be slightly taciturn. I am just going to go, I have had enough of this. I've really had enough of it." Again, it's that frustration with dealing with this dickhead. You know, when they actually do get there, he allows Kaufman to finally put a headlock on him. And then he just stands up and he does a back suplex on Andy Kaufman that folds Kaufman in half.
And he slammed Kaufman.
Yeah.
And then he gives Kaufman a pile driver. It's a wonderful pile driver.
He doesn't want to protect his neck. Like, he really, like, it's close to being quite dangerous.
It is. And I think you can see that thing where I sort of look at it and I go, did anyone tell Andy Kaufman to tuck his neck? And
No,
you go,
yeah.
Doesn't look it. Doesn't look it.
Yeah, no.
Lawler, as a result of doing the pile driver, is disqualified. At the time, the State Athletic Commission had banned that move as being too dangerous.
All right.
So he was disqualified, allowing Kaufman the victory. Kaufman leaves on a gurney and the crowd hate him. And to some degree, you kind of go, well, that's the culmination. There we are. There's the big blow off. Nothing is going to be as good from this point on.
Yeah.
But Kaufman makes it incredible. So he's taken to the hospital. Kaufman himself, when they say, "You don't need to go to the hospital," he says, "I will pay for the ambulance myself. I need to go." He pays for the ambulance to take him to Memphis General Hospital, where he remains for 3 days, refusing to take calls from anyone from Memphis Wrestling. So everyone's going, is he seriously injured? They just don't know. And everyone's thinking, well, I don't think he was. I think it's an act, but it's been going on a few days now. It disappears, obviously. That's, you know, the heat has died away. And Kaufman then rings up Jerry Lawler and says, "I've been booked onto David Letterman. Would you like to come on with me and we can talk about our match?" And the Letterman show takes place a few months after this match, 4 months, in August 1982. And it is one of the greatest performances by a professional wrestler in Jerry Lawler. It's probably Andy Kaufman's greatest performance. And it was also a moment that made the Letterman show famous.
Unfortunately not.